Good evening, it's 7 o'clock, we'll call the meeting to order. Donovan, are you taking the roll?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Keene,
Here.
Commissioner Batty,
Here.
Commissioner Young,
Here.
Commissioner Gerard,
Here.
Commissioner Langness,
Present.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Black, absent.
We ask if you're able to please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Before I call for a motion to approve the agenda, I'd like to introduce our newest commissioner, Commissioner Susan Young. She has served on this commission before, so we welcome you and we look forward to your input. I believe you know everyone.
Yep.
If not, please stop by and introduce themselves to you. So with that, welcome, and we'll take a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Chair is looking for a motion to approve the Planning Commission meeting minutes from the January 9th, 2019 meeting.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion on the motion? Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Motion carries. Number 6 is to appoint the Planning Commission Chair and Vice Chair. So we'll do these individually. The Chair is looking for a motion to submit a name to be Chair for the year.
Make a motion for Paul Gerard to remain as chair.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Something tells me I should abstain. Just seems like it.
No, you get to vote too.
All right. Chair is looking for a motion. Thank you all for your confidence in me. Chair is looking for a motion to approve a vice chair.
I'd make a motion for Eric Langness to remain as vice chair.
I'll second. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Congratulations, Eric. I appreciate you being here to correct my errors.
Pretty easy. I've never had to chair a meeting, so thanks for your attendance.
Yes, but you correct me in the error of my ways.
And the time you could have, I had to, because you were gone.
The first item on the agenda, what I would call the true business item, is a conditional use permit amendment and variance application for Lakes International Language Academy, 121 11th Avenue Southeast. This is tabled from our January 9th, 2019 meeting. So the way this will work this evening is that the city will provide us an update on the application. We will then ask any questions that we may have to make sure we understand it well. We will then ask the applicant if they would like to say anything further about the application. And after that, we typically have a public hearing. This is not a public hearing, however, we have a long tradition of taking comments from the residents of the city who would like to speak for this issue. So it won't be a formal public hearing, and then we will bring it back for a vote by the commissioners. So Donovan, are you presenting?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. It's all yours.
Chair, members of the Planning Commission, I'd like to present the conditional use permit amendment for the Leela School located at 121 11th Street, 11th Avenue Southeast. You know, as the chair mentioned,
Excuse me.
was
there we
tabled.
go. Thank you. Well, we had no video.
We have video.
I was nervous.
Yeah. Don't be nervous. I mean, things fall apart when Bailey's not here, but we'll soldier on, okay? Our So we have an amended site plan, and a big focus of that January Plan Commission public testimony and Plan Commission discussion was around traffic circulation. In response, the applicant met with the city engineer, Ryan Goodman, and I to discuss how we could address resident complaints, concerns. So what you have before you on your screen right now is the AM drop-off scheme that has traffic coming. This is both vehicles and buses coming from the north on First Street here, 11th Street on the bottom part of your screen, and then entering the site in a dual lane fashion, and then drop off around a rear entrance there. With the school bus drop-off for 4 buses in the morning, along the building there. There is shown here enough stacking for 17 vehicles and 4 buses on the site. And also noted here are 3 staff locations for staff to stand and then monitor and direct traffic. Also, a change here from the January site plan that you reviewed previously is that all vehicles will be directed toward 11th Avenue after leaving the site. And also, if you notice, changes from the January site plan include a larger trash enclosure, which provides for both waste and recycling receptacles. There is, the 3 trees retained here on this northeast corner of the site. There's the required 10 feet setback for parking spot on 11th. And also there's more direction on the site plan related to, the actual where parents will be directed to come from. One-way only signage related to only one-ways during these peak times for drop-off and pickup, 8:30 a.m. to 9 and from 2 to 2:30. And also the directing for the right turns during those peak periods as well. And that's for the AM period. For PM, we have similar traffic flow. However, Leela's determined that the children who have been brought by the bus will be actually walked across the street, and they'll be picked up by bus at the main building, on the south side of 11th. And so you'll see no buses for this PM pickup period. And just to remind you also that we had further discussions that remark how the buses, their flow in the morning does come, on 11th Avenue, goes into the main building site, exits coming back onto 11th, and then a right turn to this site, and then another right turn out. And to clarify that separation. Also, big change is that there'll be staggered start times, as noted in the submitted narrative. So that the additional 50 children that are proposed to be located in this, 11,500 square foot single-story addition will be coming at a different time than the other school population. And so, in summary, the amendment is to build the wing onto the proposed building. Includes a variance to keep the existing setback from 11th Avenue, and to increase the capacity of the school, both schools, to 975 students to be served by a class of 75 within 49 classrooms. At this point, I'd be happy to take any questions from the Plan Commission.
Commissioners, any questions? Susan?
Donovan, I'm confused. I got the enter only from the north on First, but then all of a sudden it was, and we're also entering from the south. So could you clarify that for me again, please? the buses would only come from the north.
Okay, no.
And then there was another one that said, well, then the buses will come from the south. too.
Yeah, no, it's the vehicle parent drop-off from the north. It's in order to simplify, to reduce the stacking on 11th for any sort of left turn lanes. What they've designed is for the buses to come to the south building first, then circle back, and so they're doing a right turn off of 11th, in onto First. So that's just the dedicated bus, the 4 buses that come to the site in the morning.
Okay.
So there's no buses on 11th that are facing, running east. They're not going to be stopped there. They're going to run into the old complex, turn around and come over.
Correct. Also, I feel like I should address that, there was a concern expressed at the January Plan Commission meeting involving a traffic study. And in conversations with Ryan, the city engineer, we've analyzed the traffic flow and determined that given the actual increase of at most 50 vehicles, any sort of traffic study wouldn't be enough to trigger anything that could be really captured within traffic study, based on the modeling that they do. And so, but he's also here as a resource to answer any questions regarding that, and also regarding any sort of parking restrictions on Second that was discussed, as well as the institution of a school zone along 11th.
Donovan, on the bus count, it's dropped from, I think it was either 8 or 6 to 4. But the buses all arrive at the same time. How do we have fewer buses now? Because we know they leave the high school, junior high area at the same time. Because all the kids start at whether it's Leela or St. Pete's, they all start on the early bus schedule. They regroup at the junior high or the senior high, I can't remember which one, and then they get bused to their location. How did the bus count drop with that?
I think we'll have to ask the applicant about that one. About that detail.
Not a problem. Other questions? Eric?
Donovan, or maybe our city engineer could better answer this question. Is there any reason, kind of piggybacking off of Susan's question, with the left turns onto First Avenue off of 11th going east, is there any reason we couldn't put a no left turn at that street? I don't think it would impact the businesses between First and 61 because they have the frontage road access.
Chair, Commission members, let me interject on some stuff here. So, as the site works today, it is what it is. What we're talking about, under my understanding, is what we're approving here is potentially 50 more students come in a half hour after school has already started with today's operations and leave in a half hour after today's operations. Those kids are pre through K, which have to be driven there. They're not allowed to ride the bus. So the vehicle traffic that would be coming is not related to anything with the busing. And makes sense to come down First Streets. We got signalized intersection to the north. That road obviously carried much more traffic back in the early 2000s. The high traffic counts on First Street Southeast were 1,300. Our last approved counts in 14 were 880 annual daily traffic because of the grocery store that used to exist up there, right? So to just block off a left turn lane for area convenience, I don't think would be applicable here, as I have watched this intersection frequently over evening traffic hour, like the 5 o'clock rush hour. There's a lot of left turning movement there that aren't conflicting with other turning movements. Now, part of some of the conditions I have within my original review memo were conditions that should be defined and agreed upon in the approved development agreement that we would work through with Leah that would outline some of those stuffs, such as if there is backing up occurring there, timeout, you guys got to do something to remedy that situation because obviously you're causing that, and we would know that. Therefore, probably one of the first steps then, like we just did, with the other site in south of town, would be probably an education component of that. But that's all going to be clearly defined within the development agreement to address stuff like that. I don't feel a full left turn blockage would be warranted, but that'd be something we could easily work through with Leland School, again, in the development agreement on things. Also considerations when looking at the transportation here, all the property along First Street is designated mixed-use commercial. The property north of Leela on Second Streets in the east side is all zoned residential. So one thing we did not allow them to do, which I think they proposed in the first meeting, was not to take a left turn and drive traffic northward on Second Street. That should not be prohibited. We don't want to promote that. That's a residential and residential zone neighborhood with several driveway accesses. And right now, if you drive down it, snowbank's pretty high and you couldn't see cars backing out. So we wouldn't want to promote that anyways. What we've talked about too with the half-hour delay, if you went and did what you would call a traffic model or a traffic study, you're really going to be at two separate traffic studies. You'd be studying the existing conditions that are today that have been approved since 2017. Because of the time lapse between the arrival and dismissal, which is a half hour, which is significant in school drop-off pickup, you would be in reality doing a separate one where you would be doing a traffic study for 50 potential vehicles that already have half of the area accounted for in their parking lot for staging. So you're really not going to get any results out of that that you can't work through with the 3 flaggers they're proposing and the other conditions that we've talked about previously stated in the review memos. And going back to the busing, currently I believe the overall site has 8 buses that come to the south campus and only 4 exit there to come back where we talked about then going through their parking lot, coming out to 11th, taking a left, heading west until they get to First Street Southeast, and then taking 2 immediate rights into their parking lot. Those are the 4 buses that only will come in the mornings. In the afternoon, they have no buses going to the north campus. So hopefully I've addressed it. I know I hit on some more points overall. And another thing too, the highest traffic recorded on 11th Avenue was in 1998. That was an approved traffic counts was 5,000. Our last approved traffic counts on 11th Avenue were 4,500. Ms. Member, there used to be a hospital there too, so.
Thank you. Other questions? The other 2 items that were discussed is school zone and some no parking, I believe, during school hours is,
I can touch base on the no parking on Second Street Southeast that was outlined in the application. Currently, there are 2 signs out there today that say no parking in between these signs. So if you left 11th Avenue and went north on Second, that first sign probably appears 50 feet from the radius. Until the next power pole, there's another sign you would see that says no parking in between signs, which almost is in line with their entry of their existing campus right now. Probably not legal because it probably didn't go through the formal process, which would be a simple resolution adopted or approved at a city council meeting. The school zone is something that could be considered. It will take more effort and work and time and potential money, depending on what would be required to be approved through MnDOT to be enforceable. But really, those are implemented to slow or to control speed better. I don't believe or have the perception that speed is the issue during school times. But somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not there every morning with that as well. So if that's something that would want to be pursued, it could. It's just there could be some costs associated with that the school would rather use their own flaggers to control that stuff versus the stuff that would be required to be submitted to get an approved school zone in this location. But the signage, if that was a condition of approval, it would be simple to review, approve, and implement and be enforceable because the state statute is tied with that. So, and we're the local road authority on all legs of the road in this intersection here. So,
thank you. Other questions for the city? Thank you. Would the applicant like to say a few words?
My name is Dennis Batty. I'm the architect representing Leela, and I live at 22770 Imperial Avenue North in Forest Lake. We're basically here tonight to respond and react, I guess, to questions and issues that come up. We feel like we've responded with our rewritten narrative and the additional drawings that we've done to the issues that were raised at the last Planning Commission meeting. I just would underscore the main thing, concession, whatever you want to call it, that of the offset start time for the preschool. We believe that that's going to have a significant effect on at least the intensity of the level of traffic during the drop-off period, particularly in the morning. But beyond that, I think we've addressed the issues that were raised, and we're willing to leave it at that.
Questions for the applicant? Susan?
The 3 persons that will be at the intersection of your parking area and First, are those dedicated staff individuals or are those parent volunteers?
Yeah. I'm Shannon Peterson, 9646 215th Street, North Forest Lake, Minnesota 55025. And those will be dedicated staff positions. So it's likely just the same way we're doing it at the main campus across the street. We've got people who are not dedicated classroom teachers who need to be in the classroom greeting their students. It's the paraprofessionals or others who are working in hourly positions who will be assigned to those spots, as well as administrators.
Other questions? Can you answer my bus question? You have 8 arriving to the school and only 4 make it across the street?
Yeah. Yeah, it's, the actual number is 6 right now. There may be a couple of other buses that are specifically for individual special education students, so they won't be going across the street. The way I see it happening is because we're no longer having the students come to 2 different middle schools to transfer in the morning, they can come to one high school or one middle school where they transfer onto the buses in the morning. We could have certain buses that would be, they have signs in them that say either Leela Headwaters or Leela Main Campus right now, and we could easily have a sign added to even bring that number down further to say Leela Main Campus and Annex. And so only those buses, the students going on those buses or going to that building would only get on one of those buses. We don't want to eliminate all of them. We don't want to bring it down just to one, because then that bus would have to sit there until the very end, gathering students. But, 1, 2, 3, or 4 would be easy to narrow it down to that small number and have only that number of buses go across the street then to the annex.
So it's just really a procedural item to go through with the students?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
Susan?
One of the issues, and I apologize because I am new on the commission here. Event parking, I understand is an issue. And I realize that you've been trying to have families and parents for events shuttle. I also realize that we're dealing with humans who prefer to maximize convenience. Are there any things that you have looked at from other facilities or other situations where you can better encourage parents to use shuttle services instead of blocking up the neighborhood?
I'm going to let Dennis take
Well,
that.
probably the major change that's going to happen, and it's not going to be until the new facility, that new Headwaters facility is completed, but that has, there are 2 significant spaces in that building, a large double gymnasium that will have bleachers and also a 450-seat performing arts center. So that events, even lower, what we call the lower school events, that need that type of, that size of a facility will actually happen out there. So there will actually be there will be fewer special events at the lower campus building because the better facility will be located out at Headwaters for that kind of a thing. There'll be there'll be parking out there, there'll be, larger spaces, and so a number of those events that now take place in the gymnasium at the lower school campus will take place out at the Headwaters campus when the new facility is completed.
Currently, the lower school has the largest space available. So if we have a varsity basketball game, for example, it's at the lower school, even though it's the older students. So as soon as possible, we'll be moving that to the upper school where those kids actually go to school and are familiar. So that good one, yeah. Good thought. I can imagine only one event that students would want to keep at the lower school. There's one event in the spring. We do Spanish night or Chinese New Year night, or some lower school event where those students will want to they'll want to have it at their campus. And so for that event, we will, if it's not every month, my child's concert is now, and we've got, this event this night and something for the grade level this night. If it's not constant, I think we can convince parents more effectively to, okay, this is a really big deal, and this is how we're doing shuttles.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you. We may have more afterwards. This is not a public hearing, but we're going to welcome public comment tonight. We do ask, though, that you come up, state your name and address for the record, spend a couple minutes telling us what you think of the application. We will wait and we'll listen to everyone who wishes to say a few words, and then we'll bring it back up here for more discussion and decision. So does anyone wish to speak to this issue?
Yes. Hi, my name is Dawn Nelson. I live at 207 11th Avenue Southeast. I have the joy of having my driveway right across from Leela. The parents, the bus drivers, they don't care if I have to get in and out. They are not polite. They are not accommodating. Friday, I don't work Fridays. So as I was coming home, the buses are everywhere, the cars are everywhere. I can't get into my driveway, so I drive around Forest Lake for a half an hour so I can go home. So, First Street, I do believe should still be a one-way running south. And smart money would be the buses turn at Second Street and go west onto First Street. But that's how I look at the neighborhood. The current driveway that they're planning to eliminate is almost directly across the street from the main campus. So I don't understand why they couldn't switch the building to north-south and use the driveway just to shoot across the street. The person who is in charge, he spoke last time. I'm so sorry, I can't remember his name. He even admitted at the January 9th meeting that he can't make all of the parents obey the rules they're setting. He stated that here at the microphone. Let's see. The outdoor events in the spring are heinous. I mean, there's everything up and down every street. The no parking between two signs, I never understood, because that sign on my curb was a no parking sign. And 2 summers ago, a city worker came in and put this no parking between two signs sign up. And very shortly after that, I found people parking between that sign and the fire hydrant. I walked out there to talk to a gentleman in a pickup truck and told him that's too close to the fire hydrant, and he looked at me and said, it's not between the signs. Very impolite. He didn't seem to care as long as it wasn't between the signs. I have no problem with Leela. I know people who have kids who go there. They think it's a wonderful school, and I'm happy for them. I know there's a cheering section here for Leela, and that's awesome. It's just the worst possible corner for it. When I moved into that house, it was a quiet neighborhood. I was so in love with my neighborhood. It has turned into a nightmare for me. And I really do feel like my space is now considered collateral damage for Leela. And I don't know how to get away from that. I'm looking to sell my house very shortly, as soon as my contractor finishes it. And I don't know if I'm going to get anyone to buy it because of all this. How do I do that? How do I deal with this? Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Hi, my name's Brandy Renee Fagan. I live at 843 17th Street Southeast here in Forest Lake. I'm an associate general counsel for a Fortune 500 company. I'm a Forest Lake resident, and most importantly, I'm the parent of 3 Leela children. When my oldest was entering the kindergarten, I researched all available options to me. Do I go with the local public school? How do they all compare? Do I look at private schools? And I ended up making myself a checklist as to what I needed and what was important criteria. And little did I know when I went through all of this research that I found the perfect school right in my own backyard, and that is Leela. Now, many years later, I'm here to offer you a unique perspective as a parent with a child at all 3 Leela campuses. That kindergarten child is now a 7th grader at the Headwaters campus. I have a 2nd grader at the main campus, and I have a preschooler at the annex that we're talking about. So after 8 years, while Leela delivers on that high caliber education that I was looking for, what impresses me most is the Leela culture. And I'm not talking about the Spanish and Chinese culture that they bring to my kids on a daily basis. I'm talking about that corporate culture, which is those beliefs and behaviors of how they determine that Leela employees act outside of the 4 corners of their wall. How do they interact with their community? How do they interact with their Leela neighbors? And those are how they interact with their community is one of the fundamentals of Leela. They truly believe that the children, the parents, the teachers, and the community are all owners of Leela. So just as Leela carefully selects their faculty every year to guide my child's success, I assure you that they have looked and they have considered the impact this growth opportunity will bring for Forest Lake community and all of the Leela neighbors. As the council and the community discuss the Leela Annex growth, there are 2 Leela action statements that are relevant for this evening. Think about others and think beyond today. As I mentioned a minute ago, Leela has carefully considered their neighbors and any impact your decision and this decision with Leela will make. And I'm confident that we can make this a success for all the parties involved. And we can grow together as a community to continue to develop these students that will make Forest Lake proud. So I want to finish this and conclude that I want you to consider those 2 Leela statements this evening as you make your decision. So think about the others and think beyond today. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak?
Hello, I'm Jill Munson, Forest Lake resident, 20810 Ingersoll Avenue North, Forest Lake, obviously. So I wanted to address the concerns because I appreciate it as a community member, the idea of our school. I'm a Leela parent, I've got 3 kids. 8th, 6th, and 4th grade. The last thing the school wants is to be an inconvenience in any way, but we are growing and we are very active and contributing members to the community. I think we're drawing people to choose to live here, permanent residents, not commuting in and out of the community. So in all, I think our whole school is really excited about being in Forest Lake. About those specific concerns, a few things kind of came to mind. it was, what's the precedent? Because previously on the site where our school is, it was a hospital with patient volume traffic going in and out at all times, not to mention ambulances. With or without the school, there's the park, so there's always going to be outdoor activity, noise levels, things like that. That's always been there for a long time. Also, previously, as stated, there was the grocery store, which had significantly more traffic volume, which I miss. I love that grocery store. But significantly more traffic volume moving through that corner with that store present than what there is today. So some of those things that are a concern, I think historically speaking, there's been other factors at that intersection that have also been a concern that have been managed. And you can also flip that, and in terms of real estate sales, you have the attraction of a school directly across the street from you. So if you have kids, they're going to be able to walk across the street and go to school. You've got the park right there. So as I appreciate the concerns, and I'm glad that they're being heard, but I do want to offer that alternative opinion.
Thank you. I'm Joe Lacasse with a capital C. I noticed the meeting minutes didn't have my name correct last time, but that's okay. 967 Southeast 2nd Street, which is just on the north corner or northeast corner of the proposed traffic area. Yes, there was a grocery store which had very little traffic on 2nd Street, or very little effect. 1st Street, so far the plan is kind of evolving, but I have some questions about the signage on 2nd and what that's going to entail in the traffic and what kind of, I know that there was something about not prohibiting a left turn out of the parking lot for how much traffic we're going to see and what future using it would be, because currently we have people is there going to be no drop off on 2nd Street during school time where this right turn and whatever is going to be? Because currently it lines up all the way beyond 10th. There are cars making U-turns in the street in 2nd between the entrance or to the current parking lot and 11th. As of yesterday, there were 3 that made it during the snowstorm. Not a very safe maneuver, but in my opinion, as a Class A commercial truck driver, licensed driver, former volunteer EMT, I see things from a safety standpoint. We have issues with parking in front of fire hydrants during some of these assemblies they have, and they just all of a sudden, boom, we don't know that they're going to happen. All of a sudden the neighborhood's full of cars. You can't plan anything. I've had people been trying to pull out of 10th. They had a person stop in the intersection and drop off people in front of me and block me for 5 minutes, just trying to negotiate from my side yard to go put my boat in the garage. That's how little they seem to really care about the neighborhood. Facts, people talking about how nice and great a school it is, it's still, we have to deal with the people. If a year from now you approve this and a year from now we have people not obeying the signs, traffic running through the neighborhoods, what is our recourse? How are we going to be able to police or effectively get this plan back or working? Are we going to post no parking both sides of 2nd Street from the full distance? There's 2 fire hydrants. They routinely get blocked. I have concerns for my wife that I've expressed before because she has chemo-induced asthma. They block the access to the street from the south. Normally the ambulance was there. Now they go park somewhere else. They're not even as close as they used to be. I've lived here for 24 years. When it was a hospital, there was a lot less traffic on 2nd Street. It would be a car here and there would come down to the clinic through the side street, probably from the neighborhood. They all came in and out on 11th. When they went to the grocery store, if they came off of 11th, they went down 1st Street.
There's very little impact to the neighborhood. This moving all this traffic and adding a bigger building, there's going to be changing where those students go. Currently, all those students seem to be being dropped off, or the majority of them seem to be dropped off across the street. With 8 buses, that's a maximum of, if they're full to capacity, 70-some passenger buses, 580 students maybe that can be bused. The rest are vehicles. Of the 925, that's a lot of vehicles. Up to, some are carpools, possibly, or multiple, but that's a lot of vehicles, and now we're moving 150 different age students over across the street. We don't know that impact vehicle-wise. It's a guess at this point. Older students, younger students, these are going to be all younger students. More than likely, there are going to be more vehicles than people on the bus, just based on looking at experience here with the way so it's definitely impacting how we access our home certain times of the day. We can't go anywhere south without having to go north first. And that's sometimes questionable. A lot of the traffic for St. Peter's has pushed to 8th. So you have difficulty coming in and out, going to the north also. So it's a lot of traffic in a very small area. And there are, I believe, legitimate safety concerns at this point. We need to be able to enforce the parking. Right now, people stop and drop students off in that area occasionally, or pick students up. It's signed no parking. They're technically not parking. They're stopping. So what will our recourse be able to be? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Good evening. Julie Lundgren, 6831 267th Street in Wyoming, and I'm the CFO of Leela. I just wanted to say that we are entirely respectful of the process and the opportunity for the public to be heard and the commission to say yes or no. The question comes down to, when weighing the facts, do you consider Lakes International to be a valuable part of the community? Because what we ask of this commission is to allow us to do what is necessary for a viable future. We don't come to you lightly. We work ceaselessly to find the best way forward while being mindful that we are part of a neighborhood, as the hospital was before us. We don't receive local property taxes through a levy. We rely solely on state pupil funding, and state funding does not keep up with inflation. Enrollment is key. The amendment application before you asks for a very minor, less than 10% increase in the cap at this campus, 50 students. We don't grow for growth's sake. Its purpose is long-term viability. We hope you decide yes.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Hi, my name is Chrissy Tima. I live at 17376 Ingersoll Avenue North in Hugo. And I just wanted to get up and speak today because, touching on some of the points that others had made, Leela is an amazing addition to the Forsyth community. It is an excellent school. It's a unique experience that you can't find at many traditional schools. I think that it brings a lot to the Forsyth area, and I think that it will continue to bring families and new members to the community in Forsyth. I can speak personally to that. My family and I lived in Blaine. We found Leela. It was an amazing school. We decided to enroll our daughter. When she was almost finished with her first year in kindergarten, Leela announced that they would be expanding the school, that it would be going up to 7th, 8th, and 9th, with eventually expanding to 12th grade. At that point, my husband and I decided to sell our home in Blaine and move to be in district. And I think if Leela is allowed to continue to grow, we will continue to bring more families to this community because it really is an amazing experience. And I think as the lady who spoke just before me mentioned, while I understand the concerns, it is a small increase of just 50 students. And so I think looking at the big picture and what it can do to the community and the families that it can bring here, I think overall it's a positive for the community of Forest Lake. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak?
My name is Donna Osterkamp. I live at 949 Southeast 7th Street, 55025. We all agree that Leila is a very good school. But what about the neighbors that live in the neighborhood? You're hearing from people in Wyoming and in Hugo, the people that live across from this nightmare. The school it teaches, it's wonderful. But the people that have to live by it, it's not so wonderful. You're bringing all these young people in, but they're not living in Forest Lake. They're living in Hugo. They're living in Wyoming. They're not living across the street. The traffic is terrible. And it's not just for a half hour here and a half hour there. It's longer than that. I go to work, it's busy. I come home, it's busy. You're always waiting. And the people that go across 11th to get onto the freeway or onto 61, if they put their blinker on right at the stoplight, you can't go around them to get around. It's a nightmare for the traffic. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Mira Norcross. I live at 23183 Meadowbrook Avenue, North Scandia, 55073. I come here as a parent of 4 Leela students, and I can tell a very similar story to what you've heard about the wonderful aspects of Leela, but I wanted to speak to a little different aspect. I'm also on the school board of Leela and have been for 6 years, and I chair the board, and I've watched it the way charter school boards work, because you're on for 2 years and then you go off and come back on. So it's not been all in a row. So I've seen it at different points during its growth, and I've been a part of the administration and a part of planning the growth over a long period of time, having first entered the school when in its very first year. And I just wanted to say that this growth has been very much planned since we began. We have worked with the city very closely, and I appreciate the city engineer being here tonight and speaking to this because the school administrators have been working very closely. And even, for instance, every time we've done a change to the school, it hasn't just, the things we've done to work with the area and the traffic around hasn't stopped with the change. We've added things after, like the crosswalk wasn't there when we first had the building across the way, but we were in contact with the city and cognizant of issues, and so we added that. And so my point is, getting this passed is not like, okay, now it's done, we're gonna just not pay attention. We really care about the community that we're in, and we wanna make it best for everyone. And you know, having the traffic patterns be good is what's safest and best for our students too. So we are going to continue to work closely with the city going forward after the addition has hopefully been done. And our work doesn't stop then, it continues. And we are very open to always making changes if changes are necessary. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I had one more concern, and that is what is going to happen with the traffic and everything else going on in that neighborhood when they start demolition and rebuilding. Has anybody looked into what that's going to do to the traffic flow and the neighborhood when you've got big trucks coming in there and doing their demolition and building the new structure? Thank you.
So anyone else wish to speak? Seeing, thank you all for your comments. We'll close the public part and we'll bring it back to the commissioners for questions, comments, concerns, motions. Susan?
This is perhaps for the CFO. So my understanding is that from your comments, the way that you're handling inflation is growth in student numbers, and that makes sense to me. So does that imply that, and I also heard that you all are, that these expansions have been foreseen for a long time. So does that imply to me that there will be additional growth and additional structures and additional students at this particular campus? And you have that plan in your 5 or 10-year forecast?
The financing for the projects at both sites required that we had an enrollment plan before anyone invest in those. Preschool was an area that we could have growth, and that acts as a feeder program for our kinder, so our kindergarten is full. That's the goal there, is to have a full kindergarten. We already have a kindergarten in place. We have a space for a little bit more students to fill those classrooms to the capacity that's already allowed. At the upper school, that's where most of the growth will happen. We have our new grades, so 7-12. Right now, we have, I think, 8 seniors. So we have plenty of room for growth at that campus. And so the financing that is for these projects relies heavily on growth at the Headwaters campus, but also being able to fill kindergarten.
So you expect in the next 5 to 10 years, no additional growth in student numbers at this campus?
Correct.
Other questions, comments? Mike?
Well, this might kind of hit on what was just brought up. Back in 2004, 178 students, then it went to 300 students, then the 500 students, the 650 students, 825 students, then the Fifth Amendment was 925 students, and now 975 students. So I don't know if that's kind of what you were hitting on, is there a, what's happening next year? 1,000, then 1,500, 2,000?
We understand that there's a capacity to a site and that this process has meaning and has teeth. And we come to you very respectfully to go through that process with you. And so if there are changes in the future, it may not be enrollment, it may be something else, just a change in the building structure or the building footprint. We come to you, so that's just part of the accepted process. A promise made tonight is not binding. The process is.
But I guess what I'm saying is, what's the 5-year plan? The 2-year plan, the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan? You must have some plan.
Can I speak to it?
Yep.
Hi, Cam Hedlund, Executive Director at Lakes International. When we started with 177 students, at that time, we had the plan to have 4 sections of Spanish students in kindergarten, which would be 100 kids, 25 per section. And we added Chinese 2 years later and figured we would have 2 sections eventually for another 50 kids, 25 in each one. That's all the way back to the beginning of the school was our goal. And so the growth that you are mentioning, we had planned from the beginning to be able to get to that size. That was the size that we felt was optimum for the financing and for the capacity of the school and what it would look like. The addition right now is that in immersion education, when we first started, we were one of 8 schools in Minnesota. Now there's probably 100, 150 schools. So there's a lot of competition. For our kindergarten seats, we had 5, 6 years ago, that 150 kids are very close to it. In that interim time, a lot of students have applied to us, but they've applied to several other schools also. And so when we get to school in September, we no longer have 150, we have 130 or 120 when we've budgeted on the more growth. And that is why we're expanding the preschool right now. It's been a huge success. People like it. It helps our program academically because it gives kids language earlier, and the younger they are, the more better it is. And that is, we're hoping, and this year is already showing that we'll be back to that 150 kids. And so that number has never changed, and when you play that out through the 5th grade and the preschool, that's where you come up with the number that you had. So that number hasn't changed. Our goal has not changed to add any more than that. Our financing with this last bond deal, it'll be a long time before we can raise any money for any expansion anywhere. But if there is any after this, it would be at the high school and doing some amendments and some other pieces there. But that too, as she says, we've got 8 seniors. As we roll those numbers through, we know we're going to have attrition at the high school because kids, no longer the parents deciding where they go, the kids have some choice in that. But we've planned very carefully right from the beginning for a school basically this size. And we do understand the implications in the community and those kinds of pieces. We really tried when we built the upper school to be able to raise enough money to move the entire campus out there. We just can't do it with the finances we have. So we're doing the very best we can. We will not be growing at that campus. If we are able to fill those 50 seats that then translate to another 20 seats in kindergarten, we'll be thrilled and very satisfied. And I reiterate what Mira, our board chair, said. We absolutely, when this meeting isn't over, are going to go, if you vote yes, and say, well, now we can go do whatever we want. We are there. I have been out there every morning for 15 years trying to make traffic better in that parking lot. And we will continue to do that and appreciate the comments from the community and other pieces, because together we're going to have to figure it out. I mean, we just do. And growth does mean change. But does that answer your question?
Well, I was just wondering what it does answer my question. It was just like, what's kind of like.
Yeah,
plans down the road, 'cause-
there's obviously to fill out the upper school as these students come along, that is the strategic plan at this point.
So at this point, you're pretty much done after this project?
Absolutely, at the lower campus.
I guess, I like the school. I've got a couple grandkids over there now, and it's an amazing school, keeps growing, brings new families to Forest Lake, even though some are in Wyoming and Hugo, but they still come here. But we have to think of the residents that this growth will impact. We need to deal with the problems.
Understand.
Whether through signage, through your working, through enforcement, that's gotta be one of them too. I don't have the answer if it's residential parking only signs, no school event parking, no left turn coming out of your parking lots. But it seems like Second Street is the big concern.
And we're
It's not
open
11th,
to
it's
all
not
those
First.
signage pieces. I think no parking on both sides of Second at the end there toward 11th makes a lot of sense personally.
But then they're gonna park up in front of all the neighborhood homes. I'm just saying there's something.
They might, but I think it's now a convenience thing, and the one, Joel, I think, mentioned that they drop off there on the street. Well, if there's no parking, or you can say no parking or drop off, once we get our flow through the thing one way, I think things will change. Right now, they cannot come into that parking lot anywhere from but Second. They can leave out on 11th. So we have people trying to get into that area coming from Second, and people still trying to leave from there, which just causes a tremendous congestion.
We don't know what's gonna happen down the road, but that's what we're here to discuss
Right.
tonight.
But I think one way will definitely help that a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Members, I would like to point you to page 23 of our packet. It's labeled 10 on the top of the paper. In the findings of fact, one of them reads, "The property owner proposes to use this property in question in a reasonable manner, not permitted by this chapter," which is And then it goes on a little bit in detail. And the staff response here is, the applicant has proposed to expand the school, which is allowed as a conditional use in the zoning district. So when we start questioning, is this an appropriate place for this school or not? That answer is already told to us. It is. If we jump down a couple lines, it says, the granting of the variance will not be detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to other land or improvements in the vicinity of the parcel or land, nor shall it alter the essential character of the locality. A school is what should be fitting in a residential district. I don't think that changes the essential character of the neighborhood. And staff noted here, staff believes that the granting of this variance would not be detrimental to the public welfare, nor shall it be alter the essential character of the neighborhood. These are kind of points, I think we're going into a lot of detail about how the streets work and should we put signs up. And I think one of the things that came up that I had in my notes here was we could put a no standing or parking sign in front of the one residential home instead of a no parking sign, which would eliminate drop off there. I don't know that that type of detail is something we need to put in the CUP tonight. I think that's something that staff can choose to do, or engineering can choose to do later on in the course of building this structure. I'm not seeing any issues in here that we can't, that aren't already fixed or are something else that can be adjusted or corrected later on in the process. So for me, I'm ready to support this plan, unless there's, some adjustment to the recommendation from staff from another member here.
Susan?
I grant that the variance is in keeping with the spirit and intent of the chapter, but this is also a conditional use permit. And the function of a conditional use permit, instead of just a straight variance, is to realize that it is a use that may be allowed with restrictions in a certain area, and to make sure that those, that the conditions upon that use and the specific criteria regarding the operation and maintenance of the property and its function have a minimal impact. And so, yes, we have a variance, but as part of the variance, we're also looking at the conditional use permit. One of the things that I've heard as a concern is, well, if they grant this, how do we make sure that things are followed? In Forest Lake, we have a long history of reviewing conditional use permits on a regular basis. More frequently, if it is asked by adjacent property owners, I kind of go back a long way to the Vinco property. And our reviews of, Paul, you probably remember that one, our reviews of its conditional use permit. So I believe that, yes, we have a variance request here tonight. That does make sense to me, but we also have a conditional use permit that may need some tweaking because of the variance request. Ryan and Donovan, I have a quick question for you. Ryan, you said that the city is the responsible party with respect to 11th and 2nd and 1st, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Donovan, is it appropriate that as part of the conditions for the conditional use, that the Planning Commission recommends to the City Council for their ordinance review a no parking or standing on 2nd and no parking or standing on 11th between 1st and 3rd on either side of the street?
I believe that's an appropriate consideration for council. Obviously, Planning Commission can't dictate what council will do. Though I believe that something is a condition that could be placed that the council is something for them to consider.
Thank you.
Comments, concerns, motions?
Before any motions considered, I'd like to make a couple notes. If there is, for a motion, as far as the content, I'd like to make a correction in with the typographical error, that it's within the Rice Creek Watershed District jurisdiction, not Comfort Lake, as noted in as recommendation number 6. And also, if they different motions for the CUP and the variance, so there's
2 separate
they're not
motions.
conflated. I believe also city engineer has an addition.
It was just a expansion of what was in the engineering staff reports back in January 2nd of 19, which outlines conditions that we'll work with the applicant on implementing within the development agreement. So in the future, if something unforeseen changes happens that we didn't think of tonight, or issues related to traffic, that they will have steps in place that will address that. So we did this with the development agreement on the Headwaters campus, where, you know, first we'll obviously go through the public outreach with their student population and their parents and stuff like that, and then it keeps getting higher and higher until that, making sure we're having it addressed, even if it means rerouting traffic somehow, you know, stuff like that will be implemented in the development agreement that we'll work through and agree upon, that would be recorded document to the conditions of approval, so.
And there was I don't have it up right now, but there was language in the Leela Headwaters latest CUP amendment that would be somewhat applicable.
Okay. Eric?
Excuse me, I'll give this a shot. I'll make a motion to approve the request with all of staff recommendations, including those verbal tonight,
Variance?
with
The variance request or the CUP?
The
Don, we need
CUP.
Two separate motions.
the CUP. With one added condition, that staff review 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Street Southeast and 11th Avenue Southeast in the vicinity of this campus pertaining to no parking and/or no standing zones within that area. And report that to the council with a recommendation.
I'll second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Langness, is it your intent that it's the recommendation of the planning commission that there be no parking on those streets?
No. I'm not comfortable making that decision tonight without staff reviewing it. So the motion is that we're directing staff to review that and report to the council a recommendation. The recommendation could be that there's no changes. The recommendation could be these would be changes that would be better for that neighborhood. We don't have authority to make the changes.
City council does that, but we have the authority to make a recommendation to them.
Would you prefer it come back to us first?
I'm willing to make that recommendation tonight. The no parking recommendation.
I'd like to hear your recommendation.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I would like to amend the motion to state that as a condition of the conditional use permit, that the Planning Commission recommends to the City Council consideration of no parking on 1st Street Southeast, 2nd Street Southeast, and 3rd Street Southeast between 11th and 10th Avenues Southeast, and no parking or standing, pardon me, it should have been no parking or standing on those 3 streets, and no parking or standing on 11th Avenue Southeast between Highway 61 and 3rd Street Southeast.
Is there comment on that? or-
Well, no,
Okay.
it will
Is
die
that
unless
for-
there's a second.
I'll second it.
We need to vote on
Comment.
I can have a comment first.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I apologize.
My comment is, I'm fine with that amendment, but as it stands now, it'd be 24/7. So no parking on those streets. What the residents have, neighbors, friends over, they can't park on the street?
They have a function on a Saturday or Sunday, they can't.
We can do that.
You know, I mean, being where I was raised, there were parking restrictions. It did require 24-hour parking, and they had parking passes they had to give the residents. I'm thinking we have more of a certain hours of the day issue here, not a 24/7. That would be my concern. Other than that, I don't have any problem with it. Mike? Sorry
Well,
about that.
I agree with you. All the people that live on that street, now, they have a baptism, a a graduation party or something, and nobody can park on their street. They have to park a block or two away. That's a big inconvenience. Now, in some of the cities I've been to, they have like residential parking only, so they have a sticker on their window, or, no school event parking, so. But I think the residential parking only, that works pretty well. But no parking altogether on 4 streets. That's, if you live on this house here, that means everybody comes to your house on a Sunday or Thanksgiving or Christmas, they have to park a block or two away. So I don't like that idea.
Any discussion? Eric?
I'm going to vote no on this motion. For those that wonder why I voted, or I seconded it, I always believe that any commissioner that makes a motion should have a second, that their value of their opinion is worthy to listen to. I'm going to vote no for the reasons that the other 2 commissioners here have pointed out, but I also think that if that is the most viable, that could come out of the staff report and go to council and become reality. I don't think it is for a couple technical points, but.
Other comments? Hearing none, we call the question on the amendment first. To review, the amendment is to basically eliminate parking on First, Second, between 11th and 10th, and some third maybe too.
Recommend to the council.
Recommend to the council. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Aye.
Opposed.
Motion's defeated. We do have a motion for the CUP. We'll call that. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Mr. Chair, could you repeat the motion, please?
Eric, would you repeat the motion, please?
Sure. The motion was to approve the CUP portion with all staff recommendations, including those given verbally tonight, with an added condition that First, Second, and Third Street Southeast, along with 11th Avenue Southeast, be reviewed for both consideration of no standing and/or no parking in the vicinity of the campus.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
It's for the variance.
Yes.
I'll move that we approve the variance with staff recommendations, including those verbalized tonight.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. So the way this works tonight is that the city council will make the final determination on the continuous use permit. The variance passes that is, as presented tonight, that's allowed through the planning commission. If there is someone who does not like that decision, they are welcome to write a letter to the city. They have 7 days, calendar days, to write the letter and tell us your objection to the variance, and then city council will look at it and make the final decision. So that's how that will work. So I want to thank everyone who came tonight for the Leela application. We'll take a 2-minute break because I know most of the people are going to leave this excitement right now. We're the final building. I'm sorry? You sure?
PUDs, we don't have final. We do have final on CUP.
Oops. No, PUDs.
The next one.
Can you get rid of the acronyms? I might do better. Well, I would say we need to, well, they would be able to appeal the CUP also.
Yes, they can.
So I think we need to get a hold of,
The three people.
you know who they are, right? Yeah. And call them.
Letter, so it's documented.
When you start. They got 2 of them right here. I can call them out every now.
Oh, they're all 3 here.
Donovan, just have them wait 2 minutes, and then when we call it back, we'll explain it. I'll put it on the record.
Sorry, I didn't catch that on you. He's over here.
I caught it, but
So we should have made him chair.
See? First off, you would have been chair
Somebody wants to next door to the school. If they want to look by the pool, it's going to. Let's go. She's not the It's a little busier street than if you're 3 houses down.
All right, we'd like to make one announcement. Before you leave, ma'am.
Don and Donna.
Can you please stay for a minute? Thank you. We'll call the meeting back to order. I made a mistake when I stated that the CUP would go to City Council. That is a final decision by the Planning Commission. So if you disagree with the decision, please send City Council, or please send the city a letter within 7 days on either issue, and then they will do further review of them. I want to make sure we had that on the record today. So before we go to the next one, where does that leave the traffic of your, since we are the final?
Yep, so the motion was to direct staff to review it and make a recommendation to council. So to go to council.
Right.
I did not direct a specific time because I want to allow them whatever ample time they need. I assume that's going to land in Ryan's plate over there. He might be able to better tell you how long that will take him.
All right, no, I just want to make sure that we covered all our bases. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a preliminary PUD application for a master sign plan for 1005 4th Street Southwest. Donovan, I assume you're presenting?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chair Plan Commission, I'd like to present a final, well, it's a final piece of the preliminary PUD review of the Encore Apartments, which formerly known as the Legacy Apartments, located at the intersection of 11th Avenue Southwest and 4th Street Southwest. That's right, the intersection, right just west of the Harbor Creek Trail as well. When council reviewed this before, in October, there was no sign plan as part of that. And so I encourage the applicant to put this for preliminary review before they came to final review, which we expect to be at the end of February, the second Planning Commission meeting of the month. And what the applicant has submitted is a site plan for 3 monument signs, 1 for the proposed building and 2 for the existing, as well as wall signage for the proposed building. Just to remind you, the building shown here on the site plan would front 11th Avenue Southwest and would be 4 stories tall, 91 units, and all the parking would be combined with the existing apartment building parking, which you can kind of tell here with a different crosshatch versus solid. And then access would be from 4th Street Southwest. And so proposed is as shown in the site plan, a 31.5 square feet sign here at the entrance, the main entrance for the proposed apartment building. And then new sign for the Maple Court, which is going to be renamed the Heritage Heights Apartment. The paper copy at your place there is an amended sign plan, which does identify the renamed signs. And then finally, at the 9th Avenue Southwest cul-de-sac, the new Legacy Point Apartments sign. As noted in my staff memo, and I will get the right site plan up. It was formerly placed within a drainage utility easement, and the applicant now has removed it outside the drainage utility easement, and also put it back a little ways. There was some concern that perhaps it would be a I'm sorry. It would be, subject to obscured visibility with snow storage. And also I'd like to then point out where the, as far as this, here's on your screen is just the snapshots of the actual monument signs, which do comply with the zoning code requirements for height and maximum height and maximum square footage. And then there's PUD flexibility sought to do 30 square feet signs up on the 4th floor level of the apartment buildings on the east and west elevations. So these are shown here, and this is actually shown kind of, so it's just giving you a detail, and but the actual location is up, up top, above the 4th story. And so the actual address or sign identification sign for neighborhoods, which I interpret also applying to apartment buildings, is 10 square feet. So the PUD flexibility is seeking 2 signs of 30 square feet, which staff believes is reasonable given their height will make their apparent size much smaller, and they won't represent anything that's related to any visibility issue, because as far as a traffic distraction, because of the height. At this point, I'm happy to take any questions from the Planning Commission.
Commissioners, any questions? Mike?
At this time, it doesn't look like those signs are going to be lit up, the ones that are on the wall, on the building. Is that correct?
I believe they will not be. Is that correct? They will not be illuminated.
Say a year or two down the road, they want to illuminate those, do they have to go through a permit process or?
Not a planning commission process.
No, not planning commission, but like through the city, a permit, I mean, 'cause
Well,
that could be very distracting.
Actually, the state does electrical permits, but yes, it would be a building or slash electrical permit process.
Susan?
Donovan, are these the signs that, as they are, this is what they're going to say? Because they don't have any addresses on there. And for instance, if I'm going to someone's apartment, I am usually looking for, especially when there are several in an area, I am looking for apartment number or 4926 11th Avenue South, apartment whatever. And there isn't an address on these. So where on these buildings or on these signs will the address be? When I send them a letter, I don't think I say Legacy Point Apartments, Forest Lake, apartment whatever.
I think they're relying on superior branding here. I think that's something that the applicant can address.
Okay, thank you.
Eric?
Donovan, our sign ordinance does not vary size based on height of sign, correct?
Correct.
So help me understand why your recommendation is to go outside of the well-established sign ordinance that we have had many, many discussions at because of height and not bringing forward to us a recommendation to change the sign ordinance to address height variances.
Well, good question. There is a provision within the sign ordinance for master sign plans. These are for multi-story, multi-tenant buildings. And there isn't really specific, because it's meant to be geared toward these unique situations. Like Park Place down, on North Lake Street and Broadway, for instance. I work with the owners there on amending their master sign plan. But it's meant to be geared to the needs of the building. And within the umbrella of the planned unit development, it's a situation where there is, some flexibility is granted. And, it's true, there is no specific criteria that allows, a sign to have a different size based on, the height, basically the apparent size. I just believe it's a reasonable flexibility to grant the project.
I'm trying to understand how you come to your recommendation and what the expectation of a developer should be when they're looking at signs. And it's very much out of a fairness standpoint. Like, we should have a very fair sign ordinance, and we should treat all property owners that are building things similarly, or as similar as we possibly can. And only exceptions should be brought to us when there's something extraordinary or unordinary. And if height matters, then I think that should be in the sign ordinance. It seems to me that the recommendation is, well, I think this looks good. And I'm not opposed to how this sign looks, but I want to better understand what should a developer expect when they're coming into Forest Lake to put in a development when it comes to the signs, which seemingly come later in the process oftentimes. Should they expect, if they can please Donovan, the recommendation's going to be good and the thumbs up to the Planning Commission, or are we going to have established set standards that say, here's the expectations we as a city have?
Well, I think you're pointing out basically a mission of the sign ordinance, and I believe this is and there's basically two things working. There's there is simply a 10 square feet, apartment sign and address allowance for apartment buildings. And of course, in addition to a monument sign. And a project this size, I don't think that's reasonable. There's some, it's more of an inconvenience. I won't call it practical difficulty, but there's some inconvenience with that, but there's not the high standard of a variance where you need to show practical difficulty. I don't. Right now, I'm not prepared to create, a set of standards that I think we should follow. And I think you have a valid concern.
I think on the last time we looked at the sign ordinance, I can't remember what year that was. It's been a number of years now. And I was just sitting back on, I don't think we had one building this tall built in the city so I don't think it was on our radar. So I think you're absolutely correct, there's an omission, because now we look right over, what is that? Like St. Peter's there, that's a fairly tall building. There's a fairly tall building going up by Menards right now. We have the lofts downtown, and now we have this building, all post anything we've done on the sign ordinance. So I think you're absolutely correct, there's an omission on the sign ordinance, but we never even thought of it. Susan? You got a better memory, I know, than my.
Oh, I have painful memories of the sign ordinance.
Predate Donovan.
Yeah, they do.
Thank you.
Horrible, painful memories of the sign ordinance. Because what happens is we get into what I call sign size wars. And it's, well, I need a bigger sign because my sign needs to be at least as big as their sign or nobody will notice it. Or my sign needs to be bigger because there's one in front of it that is big and you can't see mine from 2 blocks away, so I need to have mine bigger. And then we just get into this variance cycle that says, well, I need a bigger one now and I need a bigger one now, without what is a reason for a larger sign. I mean, is there a quantifiable reason why this sign needs to be larger than we have established for signs in the community? And that's what I'm looking for. And what is the reason that this has to be a different size for the property to be successful?
I mean, I think that's a fair question. I'd look to the applicant to make their case for that.
Other questions for the city? Would the applicant like to say a few words?
I'm Mike Kading, president of Norhart. I live at 22269 Lilac Court in Forest Lake, Minnesota. And as far as the size of the sign, we have no desire to have like a sign war be the biggest sign. We just want to be visible, and being 4 stories up, 10 square feet isn't that big of a sign. And our monument signs, I think the code is 32 or square feet.
For the monument.
Yeah. And so monument signs are about this size, and being up on 4 stories, we just want it to be legible, that's all. So whatever is reasonable to be legible, I'm fine with that.
Now, the monument sign is the one that's on the ground.
Yeah. So the wall sign is what we're trying to have be legible. But it's kind of interesting that the wall sign is limited to 10 square feet, but it's the one 4 stories up and further away. And the monument sign is 32 square feet, but you're a lot closer to it. So.
And
So the monuments comply, correct?
no,
Yeah.
they want to double the size of the monument sign.
No.
No.
So there's,
It's the wall, it's all about the wall sign here, correct?
yes.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The narrative didn't measure, the submitted narrative did an incorrect measurement of the sign. We measure the sign face, the part of the sign that provides the message.
So the
blue-
monument sign will not be just under 70 square feet instead of 32?
It'll be 31.5, so it'll be under, it's compliant. And so it's the wall signs that we're talking about.
But they're asking for more monument signs than would normally be allowed on the property, correct, Donovan?
No, each building is allowed, basically, there's no, I'm treating an apartment building as a vertical neighborhood, essentially. There's no neighborhood apartment sign, there's no apartment monument sign. And so, given that, there is one monument sign per building.
Thank you for that clarification.
And yes, the sign wars and the ugly sign ordinance discussions occurred before we had many, we had one or two, but many multi-story buildings.
Just skyscraper city up here.
Just saying.
Any other questions for the applicant? Any other comments you'd like to make regarding your application?
No, just want to do what's reasonable.
Would you consider putting an address on there?
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
But you can't see them from the street. Those numbers you can't see from the street.
I'm not arguing.
So this is not a public hearing. We got quite a crowd out here to participate. So the chair is looking for further discussion or a motion.
Mr. Chair, I do agree with Eric that maybe we should encourage staff to bring back, the signed ordinance to us to review and look at and see if we could make some alterations to that might be more reasonable in today's world. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we adopt the staff recommendation that the sign on the 9th Avenue Southwest cul-de-sac be removed from the drainage and utility easement area, and that they receive the required sign and building permits for the sign depicted in the approved master sign plan, with the understanding that the plan, as I understand it, does not have the proper information for the monument sign, and the monument signs will not be 70 square feet.
Second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Eric?
I will support it tonight. I think that the height here does matter for that wall piece. But I definitely agree with other commissioners that the sign ordinance needs to have a staff recommendation come back to us. I think this should probably be one of the higher priorities, at least with regard to the height, as we have buildings that may come before us in the next year that could potentially have height. And I very much want to have consistency and understanding of those that choose to build in Forest Lake, so we don't have those sign wars. They weren't pretty, as I recall. And I remember many, many business owners that were extremely frustrated over that issue. And the businesses are basically the heart of our community. And whether that's apartment owners or whether that's the downtown businesses or the Broadway, I want to have good, solid, foundational sign ordinance so that we're not having to make exceptions at will and how we feel and all of those pieces. But I'll support it tonight for the reason of the height and the size, and I just want that clear on the record.
Thank you. Donovan, before I make my second mistake on motions tonight, this one is a recommendation to City Council for approval. We do not have the final on it.
Correct.
So Susan, I think we need a friendly amendment to recommend the City Council approval.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to amend my, oh, darn it.
Maybe someday.
Mayor.
Nope, can't do it.
Can't do what?
I can't really amend the motion.
Mr. Chair, I interpreted Susan's motion as supporting the staff recommendation, which is recommending this to city council as she outlined.
And the statement was.
So I don't think
support
it's
the staff
necessary.
recommendation.
I would agree.
All right, we're all clear now.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next is a proposed zoning text amendment to require public design of public infrastructure. This is a public hearing, and we'll consider a zoning text amendment. I'm not sure, Donovan, if this is you or Ryan?
I think we'll tag team. I like to begin with some description of the current situation and some of the issues and what this city code amendment is meant to address. And I would like to just correct. Actually, it was the city attorney who informed me that I was doing something of a kind of zoning encroachment upon the city code, that the subdivision regulations in which this text is located is actually city code. It's not zoning code. It's chapter 152, not 153. So I stand corrected there. So this is a city code, and this is actually a situation which we did notice a public hearing, so there'll be a public hearing for this. We should have let the Leah people stay, I think. So we'd have an audience. Generally city code, the planning commission doesn't have a kind of a specified role in adoption of city code. But this is something that you will be impacted by, and I do want to put it before you and see if there's a way for you to understand it. Maybe there's some things you'll see that you make, some suggestions on how to make it better, or at least you understand what our intent is with this. Because last few years there's been a good amount of staff frustration around the construction of public infrastructure. And a lot of this falls in with the design of public infrastructure. And the rules were changed, the city code was changed in 2016 to allow a developer, when they're proposing to extend public infrastructure, the ability to design that infrastructure. And then they would go through their own bidding process and build it to city specifications and with city inspections. And then that public infrastructure would then be publicly dedicated. And what I mean when I say city infrastructure, it's everything within the right-of-way. So we're talking the streets, sidewalks, trails, light posts, storm sewers, city water and sewer lines underneath the roads, stormwater facilities. So all those things that are placed, and these are primarily, we generally see these within residential subdivisions. They're all meant to serve people living in these spaces, traveling, meant to mimic something you really, take care of the stormwater situation to convey it to the right place to reduce flooding. And so it's really important that it's done well. And it's important that the city knows where different facilities are, because they're going to be maintaining it for decades. So there's a real city interest to get it done right. But currently, with this current regime where the developer designs the infrastructure, there's often a really inefficient use of city engineer time, because in this case, it's Ryan and Ryan's team are reviewing items. And in the memo, I talk about a couple of situations, and one with our larger Chestnut Creek residential subdivision, where it was just the amount of red lines and the amount of time, over 6 months between a submittal and final approval. Really, that's a situation where there's basically two engineers working on one plan. And also with that, the plans are inconsistent. And when we go to construction, it's kind of an opaque bidding process where the city doesn't know what private contracts there are and what the in the end, what are specifications and contracts between the private contractor and the private developer. And also, we've seen, and this is not meant as a blanket criticism of all engineering firms, but many times there just isn't the local knowledge of the watershed district rules, which we have 2 watersheds, so there's needs to be knowledge of 2, based on, where the project is. It could be 1 or 2 different, sets of watershed rules. What this proposed city text amendment does is try to improve that, and actually, basically specify the city engineer will design the public infrastructure unless the city administrator approves otherwise. This is a situation that was pre-2016, and we're basically going back, it's kind of a back to the future kind of thing. And then also, in this case, in the way it is now, that still the developer pays for the design, surveying, construction, so that doesn't change. That still remains in the city code. But also there's some flexibility given that city council can say otherwise. There's been one situation, it was a 3-lot subdivision where public sewer was proposed. At that small a scale, it made sense it would make sense if it was repeated that the private developer would build that. A small line like that, I believe, would be much more efficient. When we took this to council in January, one of at a workshop, the request from council was to get get some feedback from the development community. And in your packet, I do include a quote from a local developer who saw that having the city design infrastructure, is an added cost. And I understand that as a concern. That's often the concern given, or the perspective that supports privatization of these sorts of things. I believe that's not always applicable in this situation due to the fact that even after the private design is done on the infrastructure, that there's always the city review of it. So you really, in the end, you always have 2 engineers working on something where what we're proposing is that we have one engineering team really do that, which as how it might show up as a planning application coming before the planning commission is that there would be many fewer conditions of approval related to addressing the city engineer's concerns, unless he's in an argument with himself, I guess. So I think it just simplifies the city process, the engineer's comment letter, of course. But also, regarding the actual applications that come before you, it's the preliminary approval is the way it's designed now is essentially the final approval, but for some details. And with how it's proposed, it's more all the engineering work is backloaded for the application in the final plan review. So that after preliminary approval is done, and that review consists of looking at a grading plan, a preliminary erosion control plan, and a preliminary plat, and the wetland delineations and those sorts of things. But essentially, the developer is drawing, the outlines of the roads some preliminary grading and the lot lines, and then those plans are given to the city engineer, and then everything within the right-of-way then is designed, based on those plans, and to accommodate, the utilities and the road, in different ways, for vehicle or pedestrian travel through the subdivision. Also, a big piece of this is it allows the city to monitor and even schedule the construction process. Still, it's private money. It's not a public competitive bidding process, which has a set of different rules, which I think would make it somewhat cumbersome. But in this case, in the way they did it before, was that they had basically the city had preferred contractors, and they would work with the developer and bid it out. Basically send the bid packages to these contractors, and the developer, of course, can supply names as well. But then the city takes active role in selecting the contractor. That's correct, right?
The developer would still ultimately have the final decision who he wants to hire, because he's responsible for the project still at that point.
But in this case, though, we're not in a situation like we've seen up on 2nd Street, Northwest, 2nd Avenue, I'm sorry, where, 2 years later, we don't have, the public infrastructure constructed. And also, and finally, I'll give you time for questions here. I'm sure you have questions. The city also, this also puts the city in a much more advantageous position to get the as-bills, which, if after the project's done, after things are constructed, there's always the resurveying of, okay, where did things get placed? There's always some changes during the construction process. So how are things actually installed so that going into the future, the city knows where this infrastructure is, and they could, if something breaks, they know what's there, as well as, and there's a case where a subdivision that was, where the infrastructure was built in the fall of 2016, and we still don't have the as-bills for that project. So this is, there's a lot to this. But the city is seeking to really reduce staff time, and I think also reduce, developer cost, but really make it just a much more streamlined and efficient process to expanding our public infrastructure. I'm happy to take questions. I also like to encourage you to, question Ryan here, who's a resource for these, because this is something he deals with, on a daily basis. So happy taking questions now.
Kevin? Donovan, can you clarify what you talked about with the as-built? You're not referring to the house as-built prior to occupancy, you're talking about the infrastructure, or Ryan?
It would be the as-built of the public utilities, would include street and utilities. So often what's happened here is first phase constructs 2015, right? Things sit. When are we gonna get record plans? When are we gonna get record plans? Houses are now being built. Well, 2018, we finally get the record plans that have the ties to the curb stops. So think of the snow out there now. If we have some issues, or a house now has a permit to be livable and we need to go turn the water on for it, we can't find the curb box. We've been digging through them, we've broken them, and stuff like that. So just a timely fashion of turning around that infrastructure, updating within the city's GIS, and also providing physical maps to the Public Works Department in the event of one emergency or just house occupancy. So that's the record plans we're talking about, stuff like that.
And currently, do we require bonds for that? Some sort of like an insurance policy from the developers when they're doing this?
Our control with the developer at this point in time is through the development agreement, which there are cash escrows in there. That's always the catch, right? Are we willing to cash in that to get some of that done, or?
Yeah, I get it.
You know how that goes.
Yep. I'll get more, but.
Just to hit on what he just mentioned was, okay, well, if you can't find the box in that, well, who's doing the inspections on this when they were putting this stuff in? Is that a city, is that a county, or a private contractor who's doing the inspections where this box is supposed to be here, the plumbing, the infrastructure is supposed to be in certain locations?
So we're doing the inspections on behalf of the city, but we're not doing the surveying and/or the building stuff follows that at the end. So sometimes stuff gets buried or run over from the builders too, so it's not all that, but it's just, if it's under snow, Public Works doesn't have any information yet. All they have is the construction plan, and if something was shifted for some reason, sometimes it does, whether maybe a house wanted to switch sides with the driveway and didn't want the curb stop in it. So stuff slides during construction, but there's no updated record plans. That's where they run into issue. And then also sometimes manholes don't get raised until the wear course comes on, right? So all of a sudden now you have a plugged sewer, or we do require sewer manholes to be raised just because of that. But storm sewer, if there's a manhole in the road, we don't always require that to be raised. Just because of plowing, less stuff we have to go over in the middle of the road in between before the wear course comes. So stuff like that just is out there, or it's just not shot in a timely fashion. And,
Okay, so
and that's not the major thing that's been going on. That's just one of the things that we continue to have to follow up with. Some projects have gone very well.
It's changes that are being made and not being reported, things like that. Is that the main?
Our guy that's inspecting will have a red line page, so when they actually do submit record plans, we'll verify that their record plans match what we saw in the field. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, so then they have to go back and make changes on their own record plans to match what was really built out there, because, their surveyor, whoever they had, obviously wasn't on site during the installation.
And then my question to you would be that if we do make these changes, are there going to be more costs to the city for this? Are they going to have to hire more engineers to keep up with all this work, or?
So I'll just kind of start from the beginning. So my understanding, the city used to allow the private design prior to somewhere around year 2000. And then you really saw the boom happen. You can see the record plans. You can look at all the subdivisions that were happening. Somewhere around 2000 to 2014, the city engineer or the township engineer were doing the plans. Then when you guys merged, then the city engineer was doing the plans. And that changed in 15, and that's where we've had a handful of subdivisions and some issues that have arisen. The developer is still responsible for all the costs, unless there's some negotiated piece into this all that, might be a separate road extension that you wanted to do anyways, then you work out the deal within the development agreement. So it's all outlined and agreed upon in the development agreement. Things that we have run in on the front end on the design side of things, so we're not talking like a site redevelopment, okay? So if they're just gonna do sidewalk and connecting utilities, private, you guys can do all you want. We don't need to be dealing with that. We'll just do a review like we normally do with a site redevelopment. We're talking about plat subdivisions that have major road and utilities and extensions through that area. So some projects require lift stations, force main, distances of force main. What size pumps do you need to get there? Do you need an air release manhole? I mean, we basically come in on the backside and have to design it for them anyways, because they're used to private work and not doing all this other stuff. So we get into the pump size and water pressure modeling, stormwater modeling. So we grab all that stuff from them anyways and go through their info and look at it and improve it anyways. State aid standards. We know Headwaters Parkway has to meet state aid standards because we want to designate that as a state aid road someday. So typically a residential private engineer is not used to or know what state aid standards are. So we design and lay out the parkway for them anyways and then give it back to them. So they work on it then before they give it back to us for review. A lot of permit applications that have different factors within them. They'll start it, we have to redline just a permit application and go back before we submit to like the MPCA for a sewer extension permit. So those are some of the things that the back and forth is, let alone first time developer in town, we always give them a plan set of the last subdivision we did. Follow the plan, copy it, turn it in like that. We get stuff that doesn't have anything on it, no pipe profiles. No elevations on the sewer and water services to the property. No elevations on the hydrant. it's all those little things that are important to making the project successful, efficient, and hopefully save money at the end, because if you missed all that stuff on the plans, your contractor is gonna get you anyway. So somebody's gonna pay for it at the end of the day if you have bad product moving through. And I'm not saying that all projects have gone bad. Some have gone really good, but some have gone bad, and it's the constant babysitting and the memos back and forth that we're duplicating your work, and it's months later. Other phases, that we've commented on almost a year ago, I'm like, where's the revised plans? And we just sit, and then we have another development. The developer's not happy with his developer or his engineer, so he wants us to come in. I'm like, I'm not coming in with that mess, So it's like, well, who's gonna finish the project? And then we're talking about all these changes, and you get caught up in all that. And at the end of the day, if somebody could just work efficiently, knowing what Public Works' desire at the end of the day for maintenance, operation of everything, the efficiency of concentrating on plans and specs instead of red lines, that's what, it worked well. Was changed, just, I don't know exactly why, but it changed. We wouldn't be the only city that does it. Woodbury, Cottage Grove, Maple Grove consistently do that. Big booming communities, they want control of development. Going into construction, we don't know what's being bidded out right now because we don't have that stuff. All we have right now is an approved plan and spec. They bid on it. In the old ways, we would prepare like a bid form and quantities that were sent out to the contractor. They submit the bid on that, and then the developer then signs a contract with the contractor, and they go through with construction. And therefore, you knew really what was bidded on and what was going to be completed part of that project. And I bring that up because part of a phase one project, I'm still waiting for a turn lane 3 years later. That's not been constructed, but yet they still want to move for phase two, and it's been clearly instated part of condition phase one, and we've reinstated part of condition two. So you got stuff like that, and then you got the coordination that we used to be involved with the private utilities more closely versus what public infrastructure would be constructed. So in one subdivision, you got sidewalks starting and stopping where streetlights were put on the side of the road because nobody coordinated that. So now we gotta fix all that, and then also where that turn lane needs to go, there's tons of landscaping there. Who allowed the landscaping to go all in there? That's gonna all have to get taken out so we can fit the turn lane in there and construct stuff like that. So at the end of the day, I think the goal is always to be most efficient and save as much money no matter who's doing the work. But also at the end of the day, we're not here just for one project. We hope to, obviously do several, and the only way to continue to do several is to do it really good the first time, because some of these other projects, you get one project in here, then that team goes another part of the state, right? And we'll never see them again. So that's just some of the stuff that's been going on, and when it was changed, I'm more than willing to support the city which way they go, but you guys just need to understand, we need to be transparent to you of the issues that have been going on with the public infrastructure portion of these projects. So it's obviously very difficult for me to talk about it at this point as me being a consultant. I'd rather wish I was a staff city engineer right now having this conversation. But at the end of the day, I just want what's best for the city. And if you guys believe that you get better product and infrastructure in plans, that's what the information I'm trying to provide you to make a decision on what you think is best for the city.
Kevin?
So Ryan, just a couple questions. So I was on, planning, of course, when we changed this, and at the time, development, as you mentioned, we were going through a slow period, and we kept hearing from developers that we weren't competitive enough, that it cost more to have the city do the developing versus their independent people. And so Paul, there was a number of us here, and I think we at that time decided that, well, it should be more competitively bid. Let the builders and the developers bring their own people, and if they're most comfortable with that, if they feel they're getting a better deal, maybe it'll encourage development. Whether that helped bring developing to town, I'm not sure or not. My question, I guess, is when we review a private contractor's engineering and when we're going back and forth, like you say, in your redlining process, are we charging them for all the time we put into that, or are we not charging them?
My staff,
Yes.
I'm making sure their time's accounted for, but there's a lot of time I dropped on Second Avenue.
So you just, so in
I
some
stopped
case.
billing about a year and a half ago.
Right, all right. But normally we do, right?
If I have to use my staff for technical aspects, I make sure that that's still being tallied. And sometimes we've had conversations, you know, but I knew where that project was going, and I didn't want to have to even have that conversation. I'd rather say at the end of the project, I haven't billed you for 2 years now, so what did I cost you?
Right, and then, so that's my follow-up question to that then is, how do we get paid from these people a lot of times? I know we don't collect the money up front in most cases. So if they're not paying us, I assume we're billing them, and then either they're paying us or they're not. And if they're not paying us, are we stopped? Is that what happens, or what goes on?
Let's just say you have a subdivision come in right now, say call it Forest Lake Phase 1. So then we have a development agreement set up. Within that development agreement, it'll have sureties within it that include letter of credit, cash escrow for services. Say if it's a large one, maybe it's $50,000 escrow, right? We would bill the city to that, would create a project, bill the city, then that invoice is sent to the developer. As long as they're paying it monthly or when those invoices are sent, then we don't have to then maybe one time pull out of that cash escrow. But if you see a trend 2-3 months of them not paying an invoice, better call timeout, make sure that escrow is not gonna get depleted, and that's what they did in the old days.
Mm-hmm. I may have more, but.
Mike? So if we do adopt this new change, are there gonna be more cost to the city of Forest Lake? Are they gonna have to hire some people, more people, or it's just the workload, you've got enough people that will take care of it at our present budget?
The workload would be handled with existing staff that does our municipal projects already, so there'd be no change there. Our existing field staff that does the inspections currently are already in town doing inspections on other projects, so that all would remain the same.
I do have a couple comments from Mike Black, who's enjoying the warm weather playing golf. And he is opposed to this, and he states that because all professional engineers are licensed with the state, he believes we should have absolutely published standards and minimum specifications, and then have all that reviewed and whatnot by the city engineer. But he doesn't think it's necessary for the city engineer to prepare the plans. So his bottom line question is, what percentage of cities or municipalities do it all in-house, and what percentage allow outside, and can you give some examples of both?
Woodbury, Couch Grove, Maple Grove, we used to be one of them.
They keep it all in-house, for lack of a better term?
They have their own consultant that does it.
Okay.
So, I guess I'm not sure on Apple Valley. When I worked with my former employer, Apple Valley used their city consultant at that time, but they have a staff now, so I don't know how it operates down there. That's the ones I know for sure. I could maybe guess on some, but I don't want to guess. I'd rather come back with, after Donovan would contact cities if you wanted to, stuff like that. But to be honest, probably majority of what you would find is they allow the private.
Thank you. Susan?
The developer's interests are not always the city's interests. The developer's interest is in making sure that they are meeting the lowest compliant capital investment for their particular project. Whereas from the city's perspective, we have to make sure that whatever it is that is installed is not necessarily the very lowest cost capital project, it is the lowest life cycle cost. And that means that, for instance, on a lift station, the quality, the sizing of the pumps, the quality of blades, et cetera, those are something the city is going to be stuck with. And if it is a lower life expectancy on equipment, yes, it can move X amount of water at Y rate for a certain period of time. But the city's interest is in the quality of the product so that we do not have to go in and replace it sooner than later. The other thing is, we understand as a city where we expect our growth to be. And yes, we can say, developer, this line is going to have to be a 12-inch line because we know it's coming farther down. And it is not in the developer's interest to do that. And they really don't want to have to design it to that. They will. They're stuck with it. The developer holds their consulting engineers' feet to the fire. We want this done quick. We want it done cheap. You know, it is our costs. I happen to work right now for a consulting engineering firm, and I understand the pressures that clients put on the engineer. Let's get this done, let's get this fast, and I need you to make sure that you specify the lowest capital concrete, et cetera, for the project. The infrastructure is something that the city is either stuck with or enjoys for a very, very long time. And it is, quite frankly, in our best interest to make sure that the infrastructure is done correctly. That play between the developer and his engineer and his direction to the engineer to get it done quick, cheap, and with lowest capital cost, then means that there's going to be a lot of back and forth, because the city engineer is going to say, no, this doesn't meet our spec, and so then it has to be redone. And there is a cost there. And there is not only an engineering cost and a dollars in engineering, but there's a time cost. And that back and forth takes a significant amount of time. And when you get into a set of plans, you're working on it, you're doing stuff on it, and then you say, okay, here are my comments, and it goes to the private engineering firm and to the developer, and 3 months later you see it again, you got to get back into that. It's essentially the same as a construction mobilization cost. It takes you time to get back into that and get your head into that game. There's another cost there. From an efficiency point of view, from the long-term public interest of the city, this is something that I believe we should be going back to. Now, that doesn't mean that our city engineer gets a carte blanche to rack up costs so that we are not competitive with other cities for development. We're fortunate with our current firm. I don't think that they would do that. But ordinances are for more than 1 year. And so that's something that we do need to think about and make sure that the engineering does not have a carte blanche to designing gold-plated water lines and highly decorative water towers. But for an efficiency point of view, from the long-term needs of the city's infrastructure and our ability to maintain and operate that, and then our ability to plan and make sure that the water lines, the streets, the sewers are in compliance with our long-term expectations. I would like to see this come back to the city.
Okay, thank you. Eric?
The text on page 52 under public improvements, it's we'll call it paragraph, third one up from the bottom. The new language reads, public infrastructure and utilities shall be designated by the city engineer unless the city administrator approves the design of such public utilities and infrastructures by a qualified licensed engineer selected by the developer, in which case, and it goes back into original detail. What is the envisioning basis on when our city administrator would use that authority?
I believe that's at his discretion. When we, talk to the city attorney, talk to Ryan, we believe there should be, some means to provide for flexibility. I gave the one example where there's three lots, a single sewer. There's one over on Falcon Avenue, if you remember. Where it made little sense, that would make no sense for the city, engineer to design that. I mean, that's basic engineering, very small scale, low complexity. But I believe Ryan has something to say on that.
Falcon Avenue minor subdivision with the 3 homes just south of 97 across the road from Quick Trip. 200 feet of sewer pipe extension and 2 manholes. That's all that project needed. So going back, when I say going back to the way it used to be, the developer is still responsible for his grading plan and plat, right? So he's got that. Only thing that would be going back to is the city designing their streets and utilities. So you got that mold to fit into the, in between the plat, so we do the streets and utilities within that area. So there's still that work going on, but like I said, one that's easy, it's just easier for him, because he's already got so far anyways, and you have to draw a couple lines, because it was shallow pipe too, less than 8 feet, so it just didn't make sense to, okay, now we're gonna go back and do it that way, so stuff like that.
Was it considered to have that language read unless the city council approves rather than city administrator? I'm envisioning that it would be early enough in a project you would know whether that would be a likely desire or a feasible piece to alleviate the many concerns you have. And for me, I think there's a lot of things that are appropriate for a city administrator. I don't know that this is one of them.
I think it's a point well taken, and I can imagine how. Because it's true that otherwise the city administrator doesn't have an active role within these land use applications, and of course city council does, and these would be pretty much everyone that would go through council, and based on case-by-case basis, we could, after concept approval, talk to that could be a part of a request of the developer, if it, and allow city council to make a decision at that point.
Another question I had, Donovan, I had only seen one developer comment, and I think you only mentioned one developer comment that you had reached out to from the council direction in the workshop. Was there others that you attempted even?
Yeah, I attempted a couple more. One wrote back, as their project's still in process, and their question was, would it apply to me? And I said no. The design is already there, and so that's the feedback we have right now.
Maybe this question's more for Ryan then. I'm guessing you have an idea or an insight from developers. Can you tell me what the offset negative is for a developer, or where they wouldn't like this type of policy?
Concerns of cost, but that's where we've worked with them up front and given them an estimate of what it would cost each phase of the project. So he's still going to be responsible for his preliminary survey, wetland stuff, so he'll know all that stuff leading up. And then we'd say we would take it from here, and this is estimated for this cost. So we would have to work within that. I mean, obviously, if something starts going outside of that, there's hopefully a reason, but you would have that conversation. And if we've had to have those conversations, it's worked out in the past. So, you know, with a private, I'm assuming they have a lump sum. You know, this is my lump sum, you exceed it, too bad. But we would, you know, provide cost estimates up front too, and then knowing your contractor coming in, you can give a pretty accurate estimate on what the inspection and surveying would cost for that, knowing their schedule too. So that's stuff that you can have those conversations before the work actually starts to make sure you're in compliance. And that's stuff that could be implemented into the development agreement too, so.
Would it be fair to say that from a developer's standpoint, this policy isn't likely to be significant enough to break building in a specific community?
What was your question?
Is this policy change significant enough where a developer would choose Columbus over Forest Lake or Hugo over Forest Lake?
I don't believe so. I don't think it affected any of the decisions in the past 14 years of development. I would be willing to say that one of the developers now, if not two, on existing projects, hindsight, if they could have used this from the beginning, no, they would already have a completed project and their cost probably would be lower than what they're at today, right now.
That's all I have right now.
Kevin? Excuse me one second, I'm just making a note. Okay. Commissioner Young raised some valid points, Ryan, and I just want to get clarification. She had mentioned, you know, lift stations, you know, condition, you know, capacities. When developers come into our city and they bring their own engineering and they submit our engineering or their engineering to us, we're going to make sure that they use the systems that we require. I'm assuming certain systems and certain piping and certain materials. They just can't randomly choose what they want. You know, she made a reference to gold, whatever. I mean, we do have conditions on some of that, don't we, for part of the development of the plan?
We have standard engineering materials and specifications.
Yes, that they have to meet.
So that's typically not the issue. In a lift station, it would go into, well, we didn't really have much experience with pump curves, so we specified this pump. Well, then you're gonna have this much strain on that pump based on the distance you're going and what does that go into existing infrastructure and stuff like that, that they give it to us, we go through, look at it, recalculate it, and know you need this, and you need to work with this supplier because this is who has all the other pumps and stuff in town. So
We would require them to change that then?
Yep.
Right, okay. So we kind of watch that and we kind of pay attention to that. So my only comment, members, is one of the reasons why I think we changed it originally was the perception that we wanted to make sure they felt that they could do their own engineering if they wanted to, or they could use the city if they felt they could get a better deal somewhere else. We didn't want to restrict them, so they'd say, we're gonna go to, like Eric said, Columbus or Wyoming and build. And so that's still my major concern as a member here is the perception. And the other concern I have is, you know, you mentioned preferred vendors or preferred companies. I think we walk a really fine line when we tell people they have to use certain people. And I think, like you had mentioned, Ryan, that we would put it out to an open bid to our preferred vendors. Would that include then their engineering firms if they wanted to as well?
They're contractors?
Yes.
Yes. So what we've done in the past is supplied contractor names that have done previous subdivision work, this type of work that your project is going to include. Who do you want to add to it? Sometimes they're like, oh, those are the guys that I want, or firms, or no, I like these two that I've been recently working with. Fine, add them to the bid. Still a private bid, so whether one contractor is low or second, if he wants to pick second bid, knowing the price, he has that ability to, because it's a private contract. So it'll be a contract between the developer and the contractor, and our contract still is through the development agreement from the city to the developer. requiring them to construct or build this proposed project, and then they go all the way up to final project acceptance process.
So, just so potentially, we would still have the same challenge. They would bid it not knowing what we require.
We would have prepared the bid
You would have
form
prepared that
and
up front.
quantities that go with the plan out in the bid package.
Okay, got it.
And then moving forward, when we do the letter of credit reductions, especially if it's 1 over 2 years, we already have the calculations of everything that's done and needs to still be done, so boom, there's your letter of credit reduction. Now, we don't have to keep doing,
Got it, so we
throwing
prepare
darts
it,
at the
then
wall
they
of
bid it.
what's left or what's been paid and stuff like that.
Thank you.
It's been for what, about 3 years now we've changed this? 2.5, 3 years? What percentage or do most projects gone private or did most stick with the city the way we were doing it? Do you know?
Yeah, the change in 2015 did allow for a developer to choose the city engineer to design the project, and so far none have chosen the city. None have used the city. There's, I mean, that's of a set of, I think, 3 or 4 projects.
If we had trouble with all of the projects?
Well, there's the one he hasn't mentioned, when they submitted their preliminary plans, it did not include any plans for sanitary sewer, though they weren't proposing septic fields for each, lot. So, it got designed, but it just, to me, it seems to, it just shows more of a kind of representative of, really the divide between the private developer, what they're seeking. They're seeking to sell land, to get a return on their investment. While the city has just, as Commissioner Young mentioned, the more longer-term horizon as far as serving those lots, after the initial construction is completed.
Thank you. Comments, concerns, questions? Eric, you raised your hand.
We have a public hearing here before. I was gonna make a motion, but I'll wait until after the public hearing.
Well, we'll move to the public hearing since there's a pause in the excitement up at the center up here. So this is a public hearing. We ask if anyone wishes to speak to this issue, please come up to the lectern, state your name and address for the record, and spend a couple minutes give us your thoughts on the application. So with that, we'll officially open the public hearing. Does anyone wish to speak to the issue?
Oh, come on.
I'll ask one more time. Does anyone wish to speak to the issue? See no one come forward, we will close the public hearing. Bring it back for a recommendation for the commissioners.
Just clarification, this goes to council?
Yes.
Correct, yeah. I mean, I'd like to get, Plan Commission input, a recommendation, but it's not required in the code amendments process.
So we're just basically recommending?
Yes, sir.
You want a formal motion of a recommendation from us? Or do you just want us to toss our opinions at you?
If you want, you could be like the Blue Ribbon Committee, no real power, but, offer your blessing, maybe?
Thanks a lot, Donovan.
Make us feel loved.
So I'd just like to make a comment then before we make an amendment or a proposal or a motion. I am not opposed to the city doing the engineering on projects. I am concerned, and I just want to put it on the record, I am concerned about how developers perceive it and how builders perceive it. And, I've been in the real estate industry for 35 years, and it is perceived sometimes that the city is unreasonable, sometimes difficult to work with, and not as inexpensive as other cities when we control that part of it. Now, I don't agree with that, but that is a perception that's out there. And so I totally understand why we would like to control that, and I totally understand why the time savings and a lot of other things. But I just wanted to voice that. I'm not opposed to it, but it is a concern of mine, and that's one of the reasons why we voted to change it originally in 2015, I think it was. And you can see, based on the projects that have come to town, they've all chosen private people to do it, not the city. And they still had the option, did they not, to choose the city engineering. So I just want to throw that out, but it is going to go to council. Council will make that final decision. I'm sure they'll get plenty of feedback, but that's just, I just wanted to share my impression of it. Competitiveness has always been best, in my opinion.
Yes?
Donovan, what's the timing on this? I mean, when would the city council consider this?
There's some statutory requirements for notification as far as 10-day advance, and I think the goal is to get this on the February 20, the second, February city council meeting, I believe it's the 26th.
What's the
agenda.
rush? What's the rush?
We do expect, there's been some discussion for different proposals to come through, and this was direction given by city administrator that we should put a priority on adopting this.
Well, I haven't said anything, and I'm not gonna launch into some long diatribe here, but I'm concerned about perception as well. And but I'm a designer, and I've worked in the industry, and I know exactly what Ryan is talking about here, and the issues and things that come up, and it's troubling to me. I don't want to sound like I'm just an old guy that is smarter than everybody else, but it concerns me that there isn't the follow through, because I've been in my work down through the years. You work to standards, we work to codes, we work to thing. It's just part of, it's a big part of what we do, and it kind of, almost infuriates me that people who would submit a set of plans for a subdivision that didn't have sanitary sewer in it? I mean, my goodness. But I want to be careful here that we don't, I want to do things right, because I want permanence to our city. I don't want us to be constantly frustrated with, fixing things. And but I want to also be careful of the impression, the perception that we create here. And I'm struggling with how we balance that. I don't sense any rush. I am not in favor of rushing a decision through on this. I'll go on record as saying that.
Do you need more information? Is that what you're looking for?
Well, I mean, we've got, it's taken a while here, but we've gotten, it's a pretty powerful statement that all of, none of the developers that have developed projects since this went into effect chose to go the city route. And, but that's not the whole story either.
Right, because there have been some that have wished that they had.
Well, yeah.
Like,
Well, if this does pass and they do change it, is it possible to have like some sort of like a spreadsheet, a price sheet, the pros and cons, like just like an FYI sheet to hand to these people that, here's why we have our city engineers doing this, because over the last 3 years, we've had numerous, just like an educational sheet that might change their thinking or their mind, like, well, okay, this is a good reason why the city of Forest Lake, it's cost effective, it's, I don't know, just something on that line, or?
So one of the things we do, or try to do at the beginning of any project, is have like we refer to it as a pre-application meeting, where we talk about those issues or concerns or things that we need to, that'll be challenges to this project. And obviously one of this conversation would be costs. And what do you need to see from us, from the city, to you, Mr. Developer, or Mrs. Developer, that will make you comfortable with that perception of the cost? Because at the end of the day, once we get that first initial meeting, we want to engage them to make sure they're comfortable with wanting to move forward with that project and then get that stuff going as fast as they can, so we don't hold up any stuff for them.
In that formal sheet that you could say, this is why, because it's gonna be cost effective. You're gonna, we'll be up, there's gonna be no lag time. We'll have the contractors lined up, this, that, you choose them, you pick them, whatever. Something on that line, so they're gonna feel comfortable going with the city instead of maybe going somewhere else.
I also have some concerns on the perception. I'm not opposed to doing this, but Eric's, I think that not only do I need to line it up to make sure that the city administrator is the right person, or if the city council should be the right person, but I also think at the same time we need criteria established that if they want to use their own, what are we going to require of them besides some name? Do they have to have a proven track record? Can they show us 3 other developments that they have done that have been successful? I'm not really sure what the requirements are, but I don't want to give an anti-development vibe off, but I want to steer them towards using the city. But if they got a viable firm that you guys are comfortable working with, I'm not opposed to it. So that's, I guess, what I'm trying to say. And Ryan, I think you're absolutely correct. A lot of times we get a developer in, or they do one development here, and then their team moves to another city, so they don't really understand what we're doing either. So.
I have mixed views on this particular policy change, which usually I don't. Usually I'm pretty clear, know where I want to go. Part of me says the freedom side of it, let the developers choose, that's the way it should be. But the format here is such that still exists. They just have to establish that to council. And I think that that's still there, actually. They just have to prove to council or to staff, and then have staff give a recommendation, and they can prove those things. Like, I have done 150 developments, or I've never done a development in my life and I don't know how to put a sewer line in. And I think a reasonable council can decide this is a good change. And so I think if we switch to this policy change, I think this still allows that, and I think this is relatively well written. I would definitely change the city administrator to city council piece. I think it's written in there 3 times. I can mark those off if you want. Another concern is, would we lose development here? And would this scare them? One way to mitigate that piece that I might suggest is at the very, very end, it has an effective date. And it's basically effective as soon as it's published in the paper, is more or less how it reads. We could change it so the effective date was July 1st. And if a developer was so dead set to use their own and they didn't want to go through any approval process, or they're in those last stages just before they want to get approval, they better get their application in before July 1st, or just pick a date so that we say, we're giving the developers time then. And I don't know, maybe July 1st isn't the appropriate amount of time. Maybe it's less than that, maybe a little more. But that would be one way to mitigate that. I think overall I'm leaning towards supporting this change, particularly if we make the adjustment to the council from administrator.
Susan?
I'm in favor of supporting this change. However, if the council does not move in this direction, The infrastructure design section scares me, as it's written. Basically, the infrastructure design.
Susan, can you point to what page you're?
Yes, I am looking at 152.073, public improvements, subdivision C, and then subparagraphs 1 and 2. This just requires that they have somebody on staff who is a registered professional engineer, minimum of 10 years of experience, and employ or have a subcontractor, somebody with a minimum of 5 years. And again, what I see is that those people may be on staff, but you've got an EIT doing the design, or you've got somebody who's got a recent PE doing the design work, submitting it to the city, and not having the experience or the knowledge. Just because you've got somebody on staff doesn't mean that they are doing that work. And again, I'm concerned about what this, I hate to use the word stuck with, what the city is going to inherit once the infrastructure is in place. There is a very large difference between somebody being on staff who is experienced and the individual doing the design work. And that is one that I see on a regular basis. And if the city decides not to have this work done in-house, then I very, very sincerely hope that that section will be changed so that the folks doing the design work are highly experienced, because that is what our infrastructure needs.
If I could just note that this is actually the current language.
Yes,
current
I
text.
understand that.
Okay.
It's the current language that has scared me for quite some time.
Other comments? Otherwise, we're looking for a motion for a recommendation. Susan?
Mr. Chairman, I would recommend that the Planning Commission support this change to move toward use of the city engineer with the change in specific language that the city council, instead of the city administrator, should approve changes. For instance, in section 152.073, subdivision C, that it be unless the city council approves the design of such public utilities, as an example of that.
Do you have a second?
Second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? Eric?
I kind of want the opinion of other members up here on my question on effective date. Do you think that would mitigate some of the concerns you had with development?
Well, I'm going to support the motion. It's one of these kind of catch-22 things in my mind, but I don't, what's the rush? I mean, why is everybody's hair on fire here all of a sudden for this? You know, I mean, you've got this whole issue of work in progress. Do we have applications in process here that would be affected by this?
We have no formal submittals. As far as the urgency, I think, there's just been a lot of staff frustration that Ryan's mentioned. I mean, it's also within Public Works. I catch some of it, I'm less, but so that's where I believe it's coming from.
Okay. I mean, it just seemed to me that there ought to be some careful, make sure that we take careful steps here, that we're not missing out on a development opportunity. I do believe that there are ways that this can be made to work. I think it puts some responsibility on the city. I mean, I think we have to be able to sell ourselves, I mean, Ryan has done that here tonight, And I think that has to go beyond these walls, and it has to the developer pool out there. And that we have to somehow figure out a way to make them comfortable, with this, particularly from, a monetary standpoint.
Well, I mean, I think that some way that, and I think to talk about, kind of how the city can, in some ways, market itself, is basically we are reducing the uncertainty around the design of the infrastructure.
And that's a good selling point.
Those are dollars there. Also, even, I'm not saying there would be, or I'm supporting the idea because there might be a perception that place might not be developer friendly. I mean, if that has some effect, that might depress land prices, which would have a developer, might change developers' calculus to enter the community. Because developers are somewhat maverick individuals, and if someone's going to zig, they're going to zag, and I don't believe that's a reason to adopt it. But I also think that there's so many more greater macroeconomic forces around development that this is not something that's going to be a make or break when they get down to it. I mean, I understand perception can sometimes reduce the number of applicants. But I guess I'm only sitting on like the second tier of seats here, watching as Ryan works through these red line things. But I really, once a developer sees what sort of work's involved and what city standards are, I think they would appreciate the certainty that it'll get designed right and reduce inspection time, reduce material changes, material misorders. I mean, any number of things, and then in the end, get that product to market quicker.
One more thing, and this is more just to help staff with what I believe was Susan's motion to change city administrator to city council. The other notations that I found in the wording was on page 53 under letter G, and then it's number 1. It says if authorized by city administrator. I think that was our intent. And then on page 54, I have in section A, it says, it's about the 4th line in, it says if authorized by city administrator, comma. So those were the only 3 I found, but if there was another, I'm happy with that change too.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. We're on to the other section of our meeting, and I will start this evening by introducing Councilperson Monson. She will be our Planning Commission liaison this year. And would you like to say a few words?
Just thank you, and looking forward to this role. And also to let you know that the plunge is on Saturday, and that I am plunging, and I would.
Council member?
Yes.
I want to make sure you have the plunge on the microphone for those listening at home.
Make it official.
So Saturday, the city council, I'm plunging, others are pledging for FLA, Forest Lake Area Athletic Association, and so I'm welcoming any of you to join me. You don't want me to jump by myself, do you?
We're good to go.
Or I am welcoming you to pledge for this. It's a really good cause for the youth in our city. So just wanted to extend that invitation to all of you. So.
Council member, I did note that during council meetings, I heard lots of council members, I pledge instead of plunge, but I haven't noticed those pledges on your page yet.
Yes, I'm going to do a follow-up with that.
And just saying. And
Yes.
yes, I am plunging with another team, but I also know that doing this solo really stinks. So when push comes I don't want to say when push comes to shove, when the time comes on Saturday, if you are still solo.
You'll jump with me?
Yes, I will.
Okay. Great.
All right.
Thank you. And all of you who won't make eye contact with me.
I have another commitment
You
already
do.
that morning.
You
and
do.
So
And
I
you
will
did
I will
pledge.
pledge to make a commitment for a donation.
And
Yes.
you did, you were great.
And I
You did.
and I hope you get closer to beating Ryan over here.
Probably not this year. But, maybe in the future years. So, thank you. I look forward to being on this and learning a lot from all of you. So, thank you.
Donovan, anything else for us?
Yes, sir. Also note that I did pledge, and my arm still hurts, Ryan. You're getting twisted. And I also want to reiterate repeat the invitation to attend the Minnesota Urban Land Institute workshop on navigating your competitive future on March 18th at the City Center from 6:30 to 8:30. Also, invitations are out to City Council and EDA for that. I think they do a great job and be really informative, as well as just a good event to learn more of where, in some ways dealing with, be a question to ask the representatives there from the development community, does this sort of public design, detract from the attractiveness of, locating your project in Forest Lake?
So is this something we need to sign up for ahead of time, or?
If you could RSVP, I think it's helpful. There's no formal sign up.
Ryan, anything from you?
I guess I would just note that 2 other sites that you guys have previously approved a long time ago had pre-construction meetings in the last 2 weeks. One included the BP gas station redevelopment project. They're on Broadway, east of Taco Bell. They plan to start demoing within 2 to 3 weeks and moving into site expedited construction is right away. And then we also had the pre-construction meeting for North Lakes Academy, the new K-8 school off 232nd there, west of the cemetery, which is north of Cub Foods. They plan on starting here shortly too, and I know they have within their construction bid expedited pricing to have students in there already in 19.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Commissioners, anything? Mike?
We're under other, right? At one of our previous meetings, we had we've had a couple issues with 2 different properties. One is right by my house. They put in a big cement slab and a driveway down towards the lake and everything. And we decided that, we'd let them talk with Donovan and work something out. Now, they came up with something right? And I'm not real happy with the outcome of it, so I think for in the future, I don't think we can do anything about that project, 'cause they're just gonna cut it off at the house line and just remove the slab in the front, which it's the community gathering place that he parks his car on every day, shovels the snow, but it's not a driveway or parking lot. But the ramp and everything, and it's got concrete from house to house, through the utility lines and everything, and around the back. Not real happy with the decision on that, so I think in the future, that maybe after a decision, we say, go to the city and work something out, it has to come back then for our final approval, or city council approval.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I don't know.
Hey, Donovan, regarding the property that he mentioned, I believe there is it's a city violation if someone is parking a car on the lawn in the front yard. Is that correct?
It's not a violation. It's a violation if you actually put, actually pave that area, that's a violation. But
So you can park on the grass in your front yard. I'm almost positive that's in city
He's got 4 cars there.
code. And if that's not paved and it's not a driveway as they've established, that is their front yard.
I think it's storage, required front yard. That
Please
one's
look in-
special because there is other enforcement that's involved there where, I think the situation in the future will be different.
It's very rare that I ever drive down into that area, but I have heard complaints about it outside of members of this commission. And I think it would be worthwhile looking into. I think those property owners were skating the rules, to say the least.
Anything else? Hearing nothing, the chair's looking for a motion to, oh, I'm sorry. You're not our liaison anymore.
I
Please
am
be
not,
seated.
but would appreciate your entertaining some microphone time anyway. So one, my appreciation to Commissioner Young on the accepting the position, and welcome to the Planning Commission. We're great to have you on service. Second, I want to reiterate my offer that I had extended previously when we were talking about Leela Main Campus around enforcement and signage. I am happy to give that agenda time at council as needed, as recommended by staff. I heard your concerns today. That offer is still open. Let's make this work. And some of it may be better enforcement of what we have in place today, but I also heard your comments around wanting some additional restrictions, and I'm happy to entertain that whenever staff is ready to bring that to council. And then finally, thank you for your comments and your work on the question around development of public infrastructure. Important perspectives. One of the questions was, what's driving the timeline and why the rush? I will take some accountability for that. I don't have a date in mind on when I want a council decision to be made, but as part of coming on board and part of me reviewing what has worked well and what hasn't worked, one of the questions I keep asking is, how do we stop 2nd Avenue from ever happening again? And I think this is one of those paths, but I'm also open to other feedback on other things that we could have done differently in hindsight, because in my mind, that is a classic picture of what we don't want to have happen again. We still don't have it resolved. So again, I'm open to a host of solutions. It was an item suggested by staff. It doesn't need to be rushed through, but I do believe we want to manage perceptions, but then also come to a policy decision if a policy change is needed. So just wanted to give you that perspective. Anything you have from me? All right, thank you all.
Now the chair is looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you, commissioners, for participating this evening.